Oh, yeah.
Yes, I think we're live.
Yes.
Hi!
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Seems
So
so
now,
long
Finally.
ago that we three
Yes.
are finally together in the same
I
space.
know, Rina. So happy that you're here with us again.
I know, right? Yesterday I couldn't make it, but that time when we are doing it during the COP, that was gone, and then I was there.
Oh, yes.
That's
Yeah,
so
we
nice.
missed you.
Yeah,
And I
then
was in this
I
very
missed the
weird space.
conversation.
Wait. Let me.
What is that? Okay.
Laughing.
Is that us? It sounds like my laughter, it's kind of like
I
that.
know, right? So how are things with you?
I'm good. That I'm just like really curious, and I'm really sorry that last time I couldn't make it, and I really want to be there and all that, right? But I saw it in the Facebook, so but I just want to know, what did you talk about last time?
Yeah,
were talking about
we were
you, of course.
somber last time, no? We were not laughing and loud.
Yeah.
We were like really in a reflective mood.
Maybe you were angry after the
I was super
COP26.
angry, and I still am super angry. And yesterday we had our women and gender constituency meeting, and people, I thought they were looking like, okay, ready for the next steps. And I'm still feeling like I don't want people to sit nearby, because I will be announcing the end of the world and the doom that will come. So I don't know how people recovered. I felt it was a very traumatic experience. So it was tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. I haven't been to the COP, spaces since I think 2009. So it's been like a long time ago, right? But I heard a lot of people, I know, but I heard a lot of people that just went from COP. It's feeling a lot of like what they call the climate depression or COP depression, Like, is that right? I mean, like, what is it actually that, is it the frustration of things not moving?
It's knowing that the world is gonna end.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to have lots of sex, eat lots of fancy food, laugh a lot, go, watch lots of movies, read poetry, everything that makes you feel fine. Everything.
Just recover.
Don't postpone it. Do it now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, for me, I don't know, no? I don't think the COP disappointed me, because I already know that, if we're looking for the real solutions to climate change, we will not find it in the COP space. So, of course, you come there really trying your best to, make a difference, because there's an urgent need to respond, to the needs of people already facing the worst impacts of climate change. So in that sense, you try hard, to get good language, good decisions. But at the back of my head, I know that we're up against, a giant structure that is backed by corporate interests, that is backed by polluters. So I know that it's very, very difficult to really get tangible results. So you try to put things in perspective. No? You celebrate the little victories, but also not lose sight of the bigger picture. Hi, Seb!
Hey! Welcome!
Hi, Seb! Hi, Seb. I think this is the first time I actually saw Seb,
no,
right?
I can't. This screen is about to explode with all the awesomeness of people here. So everybody meet Seb. This is a live mostly for economic justice and social justice. So now we're bringing an infiltrator here from the environmental justice movement, and everybody should know his rock stardom level. So I can't believe you don't know Rina, but Tete, you know, because she was at the COP. Yeah,
Hi,
so Rina, she's from APWLD.
Yes, Seb. I heard a lot about you, and then know you're also part of the video and everything. I saw your pictures and everything, but yeah, would love to hear more from you today.
Everybody needs to follow Seb on Twitter.
Yeah. So maybe we should give him a proper welcome and introduction to our friends who are not familiar with Seb. All right, Emilia, will you do the honors, please?
No, I don't know. But why don't you, Seb, you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I wish I had an anti-blushing filter on my webcam. Hey everyone, it's good to be here. So I'm Seb, I'm with the Center for International Environmental Law. I'm based in Geneva, and we work a lot on the interactions between human rights and climate change or climate action. And so the two, to make it simple, the two things that we're trying to do in a way with many partners is bringing the climate issues in the human rights institutions to get more human rights perspectives on what climate action should look like, and then bringing human rights in climate processes. For me, it's a lot about the COP that I guess you started to discuss, but for colleagues, it's also the Green Climate Fund to make sure that they also, those institutions also be inspired and guided and informed, hopefully more than inspired actually, by human rights and the obligations of states. And the main message there, I'm already getting into a substance, but it's in a way like when you speak with climate negotiator, it seems like they discover human rights. And the main point for us is that those human rights obligations of states, they have existed for decades. Actually, before we even started to speak about climate change, they might not be protected and fulfilled in many cases, but then it's important that any climate action just build on this instead of starting new conversation as if it was the beginning of, the conversation around human rights and why do we need human rights and why this is important. So that's what has kept it busy for the last few years. And maybe just to mention one thing, I'm super excited about something that happened not in Glasgow. You will not see me very excited by many things coming from Glasgow, but just 4 weeks before in Geneva, we had the UN Human Rights Council recognize the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So this was for once an inspiring decision, even if, of course, the question is, why are we even getting excited when the UN recognized such a right in 2021? But yeah, still, I think I joined when Tetet was saying that it's also important to recognize sometimes the steps forward, even if we understand that it's just one step in a long journey. So that's one of them.
Yeah. It's not every year that you wake up with a new human rights. It's something really astounding and you need to celebrate.
Except that we will say we have not waken up with a new human right. We have waken up with one of our human rights, our inherent human rights, finally recognized by the UN adequately.
Yes, lovely. And also tell us what I also wanted to ask you about the UN Human Rights Rapporteur, because Seb and Ciel have been leading all of those fights in making connections with human rights and climate change. So could you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And what was most impressive for us in a way is that on the same day, literally in the same hour, the UN Human Rights Council recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and then afterwards established this new position of UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Action. And the exciting thing there is that both we have a kind of symbolic recognition on one hand, with a right to a healthy environment, and then the mechanism that is supposed to help us actually, it's not going to protect the right in itself, but it's going to empower civil society, amplify and support our voices in our relation towards states and towards corporations sometimes. So the UN has I think several dozens of special rapporteurs on human rights, and then you have either thematic focus or country-specific mandates. And there have been a couple on the environment. One is on hazardous waste and toxic products, and the other one is on human rights and the environment. But of course, human rights and the environment covers climate change, but also so many other issues. So we are glad to have one special rapporteur very soon. The person is supposed to be nominated in March. Can you imagine in a UN timeframe to get someone running in 6 months? That's quite quick. So that's someone that we hope will be able to not just say, yeah, human rights and climate change are related, human rights obligation require more climate action, but who can also unpack a little bit. And for instance, thinking, what does it mean to have gender just climate solutions? What does it mean to speak about a just transition where extractive industry is not benefiting in a way from the need for climate action? Or what does it mean to bring the climate urgency into financial institutions? So hopefully this specialized mandate will be able to help us with that. And we're super excited to see who is going to be nominated. Definitely a big role to fill.
It has to be a woman from the Global South. It has to be.
100%
I'm just
with you on
seeing
that
it.
one.
That's totally right.
And there are many strong candidates.
Yeah, seriously. So how does the nomination goes, Seb? Like, how did it, like, are we there is a chance, and then can civil society...
There is a deadline already. No, the deadline already passed for nominations.
Yes.
Yeah, you needed to submit like a week ago.
Last week, last Thursday, just a week ago. But you know, it's only for 3 years, renewed once. So in 6 years, you can apply again, Avina.
Exactly.
But
no, you know, I also actually at first I want to see a woman from the Global South, then I want to see Seb, and then you, Rina. It would be your turn in the third. But I want to see first a woman from the Global South, and then Seb.
And then, I mean, honestly, like I think
we
the
can
women
share the
from the
role.
global.
Yes, that's true.
I think there is a strong agreement that we should have a woman from the Global South, because the other mandates that I've mentioned on the environment, they are both like males. So I think it's everyone understand now clearly. Hopefully we can get a better balance. To answer Rina, like the list will be published soon. We don't know yet, but I will think that there's a couple of dozens of candidates probably, or even more. And then it's there's a small group of consultative states in Geneva who select the person. Normally, civil society is trying not to get too involved to avoid also the politicization, trying to have a merit-based decision, because otherwise, if we start to politicize, some states might politicize as well, and then we are unlikely to win that game. But the person is supposed to be nominated then by March. So let's see.
Okay,
speaking of something related but totally unrelated, Seb, you are our first male guest in our The Spice Girls show. So I don't know what that means, but we have been reluctant to invite men because we really have an awesome lineup of female guests. But we thought you were the best candidate for this episode. So we're very happy not only to greet you in our show, you are the first male that we thought was had the status of joining the Spice Girls show. So we are very happy to have you here in representation of what a good ally means to the world on the
That's
feminist justice. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. No pressure, of course. Now it's the responsibility of being a good ally. So.
This full episode depends the presence of future male guests in the future. So,
Sam would have a very high bar, you know, make it difficult for other men to follow.
That's true. That's the best comment ever. Yeah.
So if people haven't really remembered our voices in our video, you know, the Spice Girls, we premiered that during the COP, and Emilia had this bright idea to feature, you know, real people, real activists coming from Global North and Global South, trying to make a difference in our environment. No, I don't know if we're going to show the video already now.
We will.
Just to say that Seb was also one of the voices in that video. So it's really exciting.
Yes, I mean, we can watch it now. It's a good time. Have you watched it, Seb? We couldn't keep you. No, but you left early. Okay, let's run it.
activists fighting for global justice, better known as the Spice Girls. The multinational corporations, also known as the greedy sector, along with one of the representatives of the governments from the global north, plotting their next steps to get richer and richer. Welcome to the climate change negotiations!
Distinguished delegates, after analyzing the problem of climate change, we acknowledge that we are all responsible. The large corporations of our nations have a significant role in this problem. We, the leaders of the global north, are concerned and distressed by knowing that our multinationals have damaged the planet. But we also do not forget that they have achieved well-being in our countries by generating jobs, making our nations grow. We first, developed countries. We commit to decreasing our CO2 emissions to end this problem. We have found the perfect solution to achieve an equilibrium between job creation, wealth, and the sustainability of the planet. Ta-da! No! This is not the one. May we present the Net Zero Emissions Campaign! It will stop climate change! Everything has been scientifically calculated to mitigate emissions. Here is our formula. Suppose our emissions are 100 million tons of CO2. In that case, we just need to get a forest with, let's say, 100 trees. So we solve the equation. If the forest absorbs the carbon dioxide emissions, 100 minus 100, we have 0 as a result! The best thing is that we already have plenty of trees! Yes! We just need to preserve them and prevent illegal logging! You might be asking yourselves, how do you protect the forest? Get into the carbon market! If you are a wealthy nation generating enormous amounts of CO2 emissions, buy carbon certificates! You will be able to keep your emissions without affecting the corporations in your territory. And you will receive a nice green certification. Everything sponsored by the taxpayers!
Stop! It's a trap! What you have to do is to cut your CO2 emissions.
Look, the forests that already exist cannot cancel the CO2 emission generated by those multinational corporations.
So, they're actually proposing to continue with the fossil fuels extraction while making us believe that forests alone can cope with the burden of eliminating all that CO2. The truth is, emissions continue to increase, worsening the global warming.
I'm still not done. Why are you mad? Do you want to go greener? We will do it! We have other solutions! Nature-based solutions. We will grow soy, and we will have biofuels.
Stop! Do not destroy our forest!
As I was saying, this is how we stop climate change! And we create jobs!
This only makes the wealthy wealthier. It destroys the ecosystems, displacing and threatening the lives of animal and people.
There's no pleasing you. But you won't be able to resist this other solution. It is like going on a hunting trip. It is geoengineering. We shot at the clouds to dissolve them. So we can manage the weather at our convenience. Isn't it wonderful?
That's despicable!
While the governments continue with their false solutions, the planet is still suffering. The greedy sector wants to blame the people. But the greedy sector, the wealthy nations, and the financial institutions under their control are the true responsibles. They have been destroying the planet for centuries. Destruction continues. The greedy sector gets no satisfaction.
Help!
We can't go on! They have only one option left. To pressure global decision makers to demand justice.
You have a historical responsibility!
You and your people are also responsible for climate change. We are all responsible. We are all responsible. We are all responsible.
Really? Seriously?
Increase the power.
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Climate justice! How are they going to achieve climate justice? This seems to be a job for mobilization and collective action. Only the organized society demanding justice can save the planet.
All the people in the world, fighting for climate justice. All the people in the world, coming out to shout out loud. Say,
The people of the Global South mobilize the collective power to save the planet.
Respect for our ecosystems. Soy plantations are not forests.
Cancel the debt. Stand by your commitments.
Stop false solutions!
Trade agreements need to be revised. They only favor the global north.
Leave fossil fuels underground! Stop emissions!
We need that the civil society from the north demand their governments a true climate justice.
Make polluters pay! Cancel the debt for developing countries.
For the children of today and tomorrow, we demand the right to a healthy environment.
Accountability!
We need you to mobilize to have a greater collective power. Join us! Only if you join us, it will have a happy ending.
love it.
I love it.
we were saying that we couldn't find Alok Sharma to do the voice of the presenter of the show, so we had to research to an actor. But other than that, the voices are so spot on with real activists.
Amazing. That's great.
And the video is also being captioned in different languages, right?
Yeah, actually, we had a lot of questions about it. We already have the version in Spanish. You can use YouTube and use the version in Spanish, and we really want to work on subtitles in French, Russian, Thai, whatever. If you feel like you can help us with the translation, reach out to us in the Campaign of Campaigns, and we will give all of the technical support. But what we need is really the help with the translation, so that if you help us with someone who can understand English and your native language, then we can give you the tools so that you can help us, and then we will upload it. So the YouTube video will have different subtitles on different languages.
So it's already almost half an hour into the show, and we have yet to discuss the substance. So let's get on to it. I want to ask Seb. Of course, COP26 happened, so many issues, so many civil society assessments, and of course, official assessments from governments about, what COP26 achieved. So since we're talking about human rights, and what is the COP26 telling us about human rights and climate change?
Yeah, and I guess I will not surprise you if I'm saying that the assessment from governments and the UN is not quite the same than that from civil society and indigenous peoples organizations. So from a human rights perspective, we've never heard a COP where human rights was mentioned so often. It was mentioned in side events, in the mobilization by civil society, but also many times by governmental delegates. So just wanted to acknowledge that first, because that means that our campaigns are actually working in a way in reshaping some of the narrative. But in terms of how the COP delivers then for this, whether we match words and action, then that's where we have a huge gap. And I can maybe point like really broadly at three different dimensions. The first one is that on ambition, we keep on highlighting how important, or governments keep on highlighting how important 1.5 degree of warming is, how we cannot go beyond that. And from a human rights perspective, I mean, this is an absolute imperative to keep global warming as low as possible. Yet we don't see the policies that really are allowing us to preserve the planet for present and future generations. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for the impacts that are already here, what we call in the climate negotiation loss and damage, or adaptation also to some extent, there's just no funding available. There is increasingly some funding that's available, often in the form of loan for developing country to develop renewable energy. Often it's attached with a lot of strings, so it doesn't really
70% is loan.
Communities. A lot of loan, a lot for mitigation, a lot like really clearly going for businesses, not for communities, but not to help communities already suffering from the impacts of climate change. And so from a climate justice or a human rights perspective, that should be the starting point of this conversation. And actually, COP was a disaster in this context. No additional support mobilized. And really, that's a shame for the North, because the Europeans, the US, of course, unfortunately, are totally failing to accept this very simple justice demand. But at least what we've seen at COP26 is that civil society mobilized like never before and made this the one political issue at the end. So it just keep on increasing in terms of pressure. And maybe just to finish with one point is also we see more false solutions. And I think the video really highlights that very well. So it's the greedy corporate actors who are coming and proposing the same approaches that have ruined the planet as solutions to actually their own destruction of our ecosystems. And COP26 provided a bit of a booster for some of those. And so that's also very concerning from a human rights perspective. What about you, Tetet? What do you take from? Yeah.
No, I want to hear your thoughts about this because I'm still processing. No, I'm still processing. But of course, I understand the human rights implications of the, very low bar, low level outcomes from COP. But I also understand that some of the rights that we have already fought for, recognized in many international instruments, they were also under threat in this COP. I think we need to explain that to our viewers. What do we mean by, this COP also was a push back on many of the rights already won by people.
And do you have examples there?
Fishing! Let's talk about gender, for instance, gender equality. Yeah? That was also one of the sticking points in this COP negotiations. No, why do we say that gender equality, women's rights, etc., was again under attack in this COP?
I mean, I can say something because, to be fair with Seb, he was tracking all of the other issues. So I will just say that we had a very regressive gender decision at the COP. So despite the UK trying to sell it, and the governments and some INGOs in the global north saying that this is really successful, I just wanted to call it out. It was a very regressive decision because we could have just gone with a technical conclusion, because we just needed a list of things to tell the Secretariat, meaning the UNFCCC gender focal point, to do, because next year we are going to be doing a huge review. And then we just needed to tell the Secretariat, tie up these two reports with this and submit a summary and stuff like that, which are very stupid. But then the governments really wanted to make a decision. And in the history of decisions of gender and climate change, every time we bring very new and very ambitious language, that's been the trend so far. And we are always trying to bring in new elements to add up to the, gender responsive climate action. And this time we were smashed by the developed countries with very sad alliance with the Latin American countries into really lowering it down and just having a list of things to do to the Secretariat. So we have a decision in which all of the actionable points is to tell the gender focal point, write a report, do a summary, submit this. And it was really embarrassing because there is nothing on climate finance that is really, enhancing, not even a recognition of the previous commitments. That was deleted because the developed countries say we cannot have this. So they even deleted a reference on they have to fulfill their previous commitments. And they also even refused to acknowledge the impact of the multiple crises has had on women's human rights. So, we've seen a regression on 20 decades, to say the least, on women's human rights in the past 2 years. And they even refused to put that in. So it's really embarrassing. It's a regression because in next year's conservative countries may well say, we can do that. We can tell the UNFCCC to keep on working on how many women are coming to the COP, as if that was the most relevant thing to say. Everybody says, oh, yes, gender and participation. It's like, the world is ending. Women are upholding the entire economy, especially women from islands and least developed states. And saying that we need women's participation as the fashion statement of the year is really, really pathetic. And I've heard many INGOs saying that this is so important because women's participation was highlighted on Gender Day. It's like, that's crap. And then finally, we are gonna go towards next year with this very low bar, and we are now going to have to fight even more just to get decent language because of this precedent. So it's don't get me started on the gender decision. As you can see, I get super upset. But what we did achieve just a minor tiny thing is that we managed to bring in some coherence between ILO and the UNFCCC, because the UNFCCC always rejects to be in touch with the UN, and perhaps Steph can tell us more about this. Why? Precisely because of what he has been saying about this is not about a technical issue. This is impacting lives of people. So when the UNFCCC says we don't want to be in touch with the UN, is we don't want to fulfill our mandate on human rights and recognize the terrible impacts we're having on people's lives. So for the first time, we have a recognition that ILO can submit a report on the impacts of just transition of the workforce to a gender implication on what does this mean on formal work, informal work, you know, especially including unpaid domestic and care work and the sexual division of labor. So I think that is the only thing we can claim as a victory, just making a tiny scratch in the UNFCCC, but we have to make the best out of this.
And I have another example of the same, like, you know, a 10-year kind of work back. It's for what is called Action for Climate Empowerment. That's a fancy title, but holds a package of issues that with a new work program that was adopted here and that was clearly mandated. So we were expecting to have it. Action for Climate Empowerment under the UN Climate Agreement is supposed to be about public participation, access to information, climate education. So it's how do we basically use those procedural or kind of soft skill approaches to empower citizens to contribute to climate decision making and climate action. And so this was the fourth work program on this issue. And in the past, human rights was not mentioned in those work programs. And it's really puzzling because you have a right to access to information on environmental matters. You have a right to participate in decision-making related to the environment. And every state has recognized the right of children to education on environmental matters, except for the US because they haven't ratified the Child Rights Convention, but everyone else has ratified that instrument. And so for us, we worked like with partners, with UN institutions, with civil society, youth, many other groups for a couple of years to make sure that this time the need for a right-based approach would be at the core of this new 10-year work program. It's a new work program that they call the Glasgow Work Program that starts from now and is supposed to run all the way to 2031. So quite a lot of time, like my kids will be already going out in clubs by that time. We came thinking that in Glasgow, thinking that this would be the low-hanging fruit. You know, there is no harm in recognizing that yes, children have a right to climate education. It should be quite straightforward. And also, as governments keep telling us, oh, we are struggling to meet our mitigation ambition, maybe that's the way. It's like further educating the population so that they get more of ambitious mandates. And just one delegate from a conservative country was able to take out this language on the human rights approach. And all of the other governments were just too much under pressure. They wanted to have a decision. They felt that somehow like getting these 3 pages of text was more important than having a work program that's potentially running for 10 years that's meaningful. And just to explain then maybe what's the difference between right-based approach to those issues or not right-based approach. In the past, these work programs on climate education and public participation had a lot of workshops. And so what we have seen many times were glossy PowerPoint presentation highlighting how that one school benefited from different fundings from foundations and the governments, whatever, and had a 6-month-long program where kids did amazing things. And I loved it. I mean, I was inspired. I was like, give me the address, let me register my kids. But my question is, what about the schools in the same country, but are in places where it's not the upper middle class, when it's not like the majority, great white, whatever it is, people? Like, do you have a systematic approach? Do you make sure that this is actually a common standard, or are you just showing us your best case? There were sometimes a few presentations that were a lot less exciting, but when they reflected on how some governments made climate education compulsory part of the program across all schools. That's so much more interesting actually, because at the end of the day, it brings this issue of justice, every child having access to this information, no matter where their school is located. But unfortunately, now with this decision now to be based on human rights and just to ignore this, because that's what more or less what they agreed there, we're just likely to see again, like just some good case studies, people patting each other in the back, highlighting how this one project was brilliant. And the same, of course, for participation. You can have a great participatory process where in one city, people took part to workshops and so on, while of course people don't have their right to participate in decision related to fossil fuel infrastructure, for instance, is absolutely not respected in any way. And the government actually contributes in violating those rights for the benefit of fossil fuel companies. So that's the difference between having the UN like acknowledge the fact that actually the UN generally is based on the principle of human rights, or turning a blind eye to it.
Steph, we haven't discussed yet in our show, because last show we were just, Peter and I were just disparaging against participation and, the oppressive regime and the dictatorship of the UK in kicking out civil society. But we haven't gone really well on ambition and on loss and damage. Maybe Tete can tell us more about it. But on ambition and Article 6, I just want, because this is like the review of the COP. And funnily enough, we brought our human rights experts and no, a technical Article 6 mitigation measures expert. Why is that? Because to us, it is precisely at the core of the success or the failure of the COP. What was agreed in the mitigation element, meaning the reduction of emissions, meaning the Article 6 discussion, and what is there in relation to human rights. And as I'm guessing, CL has been having also some evaluations of what does that technical language mean. So if you can share with us, what is it, your understanding now of Article 6 and the linkages to first, to reduction of emissions, and second, to climate change and human rights.
So Article 6 is carbon trading, or let's say offset schemes, generally speaking. From our perspective, that's a bad idea altogether, because the point of it is that we need to get the fossil fuel industry and all industries relying on that out of business as soon as possible, and developing alternatives so that we can no longer rely on those, because those always generate emissions of greenhouse gases, plus the extractive industries are anyway very harmful for the rights of communities. And so the objective should have been, since over 3 decades, to think about how we get policies and research and businesses all aligned to get out of fossil fuel. Has this happened? Absolutely not so far, right? The amount of the share of fossil fuel for the overall production of energy today is the same than it was in 1992. We have just not even started to exit our dependency on fossil fuel. And there, offsets play a role, because what offsets do is to tell companies in the north, your business, yes, right now your industry, your facilities, your factories, they are very pollutant, and they are clearly not in line with the long-term sustainability or decarbonization objective. But do not worry, it's fine as long as you can buy some credits elsewhere. If we have these schemes, we are not pushing companies or economic decision makers to make the hard choices of thinking, how do I make sure that in 10 years this business model, facility, whatever it is, has stopped and have transitioned, because they know that it's fine for them as long as they can generate enough profits to purchase those credits. And so this is why, from our perspective, offsets really, and particularly like having no phase out of offsets, or no idea that offsets are not seen as a transition, they are seen as something to stay. So basically, this is a false solution from the perspective of not highlighting that there is no future for fossil fuel. What offsets say is no, it's fine as long as you can plant trees, and that's what the video showed well. As long as you can go and grab land in other countries to plant some fast-growing crops that destroy ecosystems and ruin local communities, you're fine. So that's the first problem. Now we have that.
So if I can, I'm going to interrupt you a bit just to say that this is why we're saying that the UNFCCC is a market trading entity. It's really not addressing climate change. That was the Kyoto Protocol. It showed that it didn't work because it was the same crediting offsetting, and now it's the same. We showed that didn't work. They're doing the same. And tell us a bit before you move to the second point about the F word. Why were you calling to have the F word in the UNFCCC? Funnily enough, it hasn't been mentioned so far.
Yeah, the F word, so fossil fuels were mentioned for the first time in a COP decision. And so basically what it means is that we are not speaking about a UN climate agreement. We're speaking about a decision. And there are dozens adopted every year since 1992. So in total, I think now we're getting close to 500 pages of political decisions on climate change. And the first time that we have a reference to fossil fuel. Just fossil fuel is 85% of the problem, right? So it's like if you're sick and the doctor is telling you, like, I'm going to address the 15% of, of threat to your health, but 85%, let's leave it aside. We might come back in 30 years to this problem. But let's start with that little minor problem on the side and focus on it for 30 years. So that's the challenge that we have faced, no reference to fossil fuel. At the same time, does the COP26 say that we need to phase out fossil fuel? Of course not. The COP26 say we need to phase out some, and there's a lot of caveats, words that have been added. The paragraph now is so long because all of the words added to undermine the meaning, but basically it speaks about phasing down of coal power, unabated coal power. It doesn't speak about oil, it doesn't speak about gas, and it does speak about fossil fuel, but fossil fuel subsidies, and only the inefficient one. So there's so many things that are wrong with this paragraph, but at least we have the first reference to it. At the same time, outside of the COP, there were so many initiatives where governments finally came together, and some of them, in some of the initiatives, they agreed. So initiatives mean it's a declaration of good intention. There is no tracking accountability mechanism yet, but at least it's kind of, bottom up from a state perspective, so still like at the national level, but with governments coming together and saying like, well, we form a club of friends towards a common purpose. And so there were several of them on fossil fuel, including one where, for instance, we call it BOGA, the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, where they said, like, we recognize that we no longer need oil and gas, and we should stop extracting. So that's very interesting because for a long time, the focus has been on the consumption. But then consumption, it puts the onus back on communities, on people who rely on fossil fuel, to get heating or whatever services. But we haven't focused on extraction, where it's not like the random local communities that is benefiting from extraction. It's like the big, greedy 70 carbon majors. Yes, and Tete, your facial expression is much better than mine when we speak about this. But so it's a minority of corporate actors. And so that BOGA initiative, for instance, gives us hope because it's focusing also not just on the consumption side, but on the supply, on the extraction side. Not to mention the fact that it's very, like, extraction of fossil fuel, like any other minerals, often brings so many environmental hazards as well for communities and ecosystems. So there were some positive developments, but on the margins of the COP.
Thank you. But now I interrupted you, and can you speak of Article 6 and the human rights?
Sure. So Article 6, bad idea from the start. Second, if there are trading mechanisms, are there ways to try to avoid that they double count? That basically the country where the project takes place is saying, oh, that's an emission reduction for us. We count this for our own climate policy, while the country buying the credit is also doing the same. There, to the most extent, the risks have been actually avoided. There are still some problems. For instance, bringing what we call junk credits from the past, pieces of paper that do not relate to any actual emission reductions. So there are problems there. And then third, the challenge is the local impacts for communities where a project is going to be designed. If, like, investors are not stupid, they are very good at identifying where can you develop a renewable, with big quotation marks, project in a way that's the cheapest, the most convenient for you. And of course, it's a lot more convenient for investors to embrace a new, like for instance, hydropower project in a place where you know that the local government is not going to really ask you to respect the rights of indigenous peoples, to compensate people and not just evict them from their lands. And so what we've seen in the past under the Kyoto Protocol is many projects implemented in the name of climate action as green power projects. They were basically big power dams, big plantations for the sake of biofuel in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, where the rights of the local communities were not respected, but the investor could actually generate some carbon credits and benefit financially from it. And then the Europeans, they were benefiting from it because they would use the carbon credits to compensate for their own lack of action at home. So this is what we have worked to avoid. It's a mixed bag. There is at least some acknowledgement that human rights need to be protected, but still the threat is there, and there are many loopholes, many risk threats for local communities that will see those investors coming in their lands to try to develop climate projects. And of course, I mean, if we speak about human rights, to come back to the point I was making in the first place, we need to see big polluting fossil fuel companies in the north also getting out of business or really transforming their business model away from fossil fuel so that they stop also having facilities destroying the health of local communities, even in the north. In the US, for instance, most of the petrochemical plants, they are located in areas with a lot of Black communities around them or communities of color. And there is a very clear environmental injustice there, where those fossil fuel plants are harming communities that are already marginalized in the political system. So that's another way in which offsets actually undermine human rights, is by avoiding those companies to be forced out of their current ways of producing whatever products they sell.
Yeah,
so that's not a very inspiring story, Emilia.
No, thank you so much.
Question.
I really like what you're saying, because you're from the global north, and we need to have colleagues from the global north calling out their governments, calling out the dynamics, because, you know, at the final plenary, we heard all of these hypocritical statements about how, oh, now we are in the right direction and we're saving the lives of our children and our grandchildren. And civil society said, yeah, you're talking about your children and grandchildren in the future for the global north, but children are dying now in the global south. But the hypocriticalness of the global north in just sending every impact to the global south, and I just can't make the connection again with the vaccines. And now they're shutting down the borders. It was a problem before the COP. They keep on doing that, and you know, the variant, we should call it the Dutch variant. We should shut down the Dutch from going to everywhere in the world. But that's not happening. They're locking out the poor people, the people who has no responsibility on causing any of the damage. And we keep on seeing that over and over. And the main responsibles are the wealthy countries. So this is why we really definitely need more white allies from the global north, speaking out, confronting their governments and confronting these powerful dynamics, unlike INGOs who just want to pamper governments in their backs and say, thank you so much for doing such a great job. Rina, you haven't said anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Shock.
So I'm really absorbed, you know, try to absorb of what Sep is trying to say, and then try to relate it to also what happened here. You know, Sep, you know, APWLD, we work a lot with the grassroots women organization and grassroots communities. I just remember this when you're talking about carbon market, and then also how it leads to, a lot of it also leads to conservation in Thailand, for instance, with the national parks, right? And then how, you know, we actually supported this community called Ban Sapwai in northern Thailand. And then they actually, like, the whole community was arrested and then even sued, you know, using the climate credit, you know, yeah, so can you imagine that they're actually, arrested and then saying that because of you we lost this much of emission and etc., while they have been staying there for a long time. So this is something that makes me angry. And then of course that I don't know what's going to happen if I'm there in the COP26. I'm probably going to be very, very frustrated listening to that. Yeah.
And excuse me for taking the word so long, but it's just that Seb just posted this word that he said financialization is the key word here. And we've been trying to bringing our analysis from the economic justice world to the environmental justice to say, stop asking for the $100 billion, talk about the trillions that are needed, because there are trillions flowing to the financial sector from the banking industries and the financial sector. And now this was also very strong in the hallways. So this is good. And we need to figure out and understand how we're going to bring that discussion next year for the financial climate commitments. On the other end, we also need to educate our economic justice colleagues, because they keep on talking about nature-based solutions or net zero, because they just hear all the jargon and they keep on making their estimations and stuff about nature-based solutions projects and the financial support. Or even I've heard on the other end, environmental justice activists calling for more private finance or blended finance to enhance climate finance. And they're just doing more damage by privatizing projects, but by reducing the role of the state and therefore the protection of human rights or indigenous people's rights and stuff. So there needs to be a stronger dialogue between the wisdom and the knowledge from one end, the wisdom and the knowledge on the other end, and the mobilization, the powerful mobilization that can come out in the end from this understanding. And this is why you're here, but hopefully we can think of future steps towards COP27 on this. What do you think? What can we do besides filing lawsuits against all of the powerful actors?
And maybe let's also not focus too much on COP27, but really what we have seen, I think, is that at COP26, on loss and damage, the US, they're going to be a pain. But why didn't we get the Europeans to come with some compromise in hand, to isolate the US and just say, no, we recognize that climate change is harming people and that they need our support now. So that's one example. I think there are many others like this, but we really need to do so much more work at home to get progress against fossil fuel, trying to curtail and limit the role that Article 6 is going to play. There are some countries that haven't yet signaled very strong interest to use Article 6. So are there ways for us to, try to close the door now that this market exists? Can we at least limit its size so that we limit the harms for communities and we also focus on real solutions? So it's so many ways to work at the national level, and including a lot in the north. I think that has to be the priority. And unfortunately, COP27 in Egypt, COP28 in UAE, for civil society participation, that is going to be tough. And that's why also I'm so ashamed of having hosted the COP on our continent. The UK will say, we are not on the continent, we're an island. But still, from the region, we hosted the COP. It was the COP that was supposed to go to Western Europe. And as a region, we screwed up so badly for the civil society space. What kind of precedent do we create before the next COPs in much more repressive regimes? So this is also something that we'll be working on, is making sure there is a political price when big policymakers are taking such repressive steps as we have seen at COP27. At COP26, I'm already jumping on.
And it's very sad that we're running out of time in 1 minute, because it would have been great also to hear about the potential of working with human rights treaty bodies. I would just want to file a lawsuit against everybody, but there is a binding legal ways also to address things, and in engaging with national, local, regional, global, and there are many great experiences out there. And I know Ciel is doing this amazing work in mapping the human rights treaty bodies and the way civil society and social movements can engage there. Maybe you can talk about that for 1 minute or two.
Yeah, I think the key for us is to try to see how we use existing legally binding obligations and also reporting obligation, where civil society is actually unable to provide like shadow reports, to get the UN to ask tough questions on governments. Most of the time, those are not legally binding. They do not. I mean, we can also file a communication like a lawsuit in a way, but it's a lot more complicated. But at least we can send shadow reports and get the UN to basically legitimize the arguments that are brought in local campaigns by highlighting that, no, this is actually a good question. And yes, indeed, there is a legal obligation that this state has decided voluntarily to recognize. One state recognized those obligations to protect right to life, right to health, right to public participation, the prohibition of any form of discrimination against women. We just need to use that. And just to give one example, for instance, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women has told Norway, look, like you're extracting oil. There's no way that this is not going to result in increased emissions. And more climate change means more impacts on women because, of course, women are disproportionately impacted because of pre-existing policy inequalities. So this means that your extraction of oil is fueling the discrimination against women at the end of the day. That's brilliant. This is exactly the kind of analysis we need. And it's great to see sometimes UN committees or bodies drawing the same conclusions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And this is another discussion because we need to also arm civil society with more knowledge now that we're going into different eras. Usually civil society talks about human rights within their own boundaries, within their own frontiers, and then they talk about, oh, I just want to shame my country. Whereas now it looks like we really need to make more articulate interrelations about why Norway is impacting Thailand or Canada is impacting Central America, the extraterritorial dimension of human rights. And also we haven't mentioned this a lot, but the future implication of human rights violations with intergenerational equity. I don't think that people is really aware of what the implication of violation of human rights means towards the future, and we're seeing that. So this work that Ciel is doing with many other amazing colleagues on the human rights treaty bodies is really setting the ground for future work that all of us needs to engage in. So thank you for that. And I mean, we're running to the end of our episode. Teter and Rina, you want to say something before we go?
Thank you so much, Seb. Thank you for being here. Yes.
And thank you all,
Seb, our honorary woman.
Our worthy Spice Girls guest.
Honorary the Spice Girl.
Thanks, I really appreciate that title. I will put it in bold on my desk. And I must say, thank you to all of you for the great work. Emilia is the person I go to and find in the corridors at COP when I'm becoming too depressed with the state of play in the negotiation, because I know she will share my anger, but also be about fighting back and keeping the power and the fire. So thank you so much for all of that.
My dear.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Let's keep on linking struggles.
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.